and welcome to Global Connections. I'm Patrick Bratton, your host here at ThinkTech TV. Today we're going to continue our conversations about North Korea and security issues in Northeast Asia, and I'm joined by a very special guest, a friend of mine for many years, Ryo Hinata-Yamaguchi. He's my friend. I mispronounced his name. That's fine. He is a visiting professor at Pusan National University in the Department of Global Studies. He had been here previously in Hawaii as a research adjunct fellow at Pacific Forum, CSIS, one of our local think tanks here in Hawaii. So without further ado, welcome again back to ThinkTech.
Oh, thank you very much.
Good. So you are in Pusan National University right now as a visiting professor.
Right. So I'm over at Pusan National University teaching international relations, security, and comparative politics in East Asia.
Okay, interesting. I have to ask this question. I mean, you seem to have gone from many places, from Japan to Hawaii, now to South Korea. What brought you into this field? Where are you from originally?
Well, I'm originally from Nagano, Japan, so countryside, and I was from a farming family. But when I was about 6, my grandfather actually wanted me to become a naval officer and said, to become a good naval officer, you've got to learn English. So I was sent over to UK, Australia, US, just travel around, just going to school, and ended up going to college in Australia. I was going to study agriculture, but didn't have the mathematics with me. So I ended up going to international relations and just went from there.
So you were in Canberra in Australia?
That's right, yeah, Australian National University in Canberra. And that's where I started studying international relations, but particularly Korean studies, or so East Asian studies. And started looking into North Korea and Japanese security.
Interesting. And so from Australia then to Hawaii, or was there a stop in between?
Well, there were I'll say there were several stops in between. I went back to Japan, to serve as a reservist at one stage in the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force. Also, I was in, where else was I in? I was in Malaysia doing some temporary research. And also South Korea too, where I was trying to learn the Korean language. So I've been several places. And then just when I finished my PhD dissertation, I was invited to work at the Pacific Forum in Honolulu, and came over, worked for about a year and a half. Then moved on to Indonesia again for about 4 months teaching there. And then to Pusan National University.
Okay.
So yeah, I know it's confusing, like, trying to explain my CV is like an uphill struggle, but I've been moving around, trying to understand the local perspectives. That's one of my principles in research, is trying to understand, what the local perspectives are and the circumstances in that country.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have to ask this question.
Yeah.
I mean, so you somebody from Japan who studies Korean politics, teaching Korean politics in Korea.
Right.
How does that go?
It goes interestingly. Right. I'll say that. Well, there are a lot of surprises. It raised a lot of eyebrows in Korea, but at the same time, like I would say to them, okay, well, it would be odd if an American person was teaching Korean politics, and then they find out that it's not so much about the nationality. But what has been interesting is that the way in which the students have learned Korean politics in Korea is different from the outside perspectives, right? So there'll be many things that they just didn't know. There's a generational change in Korea right now where they're not actually familiar with the history of their own political system, right? So like how many parties were there when Korea became independent? What were the stories behind the scenes when the presidents changed over? Those kind of things. I mean, that's what I'm trying to teach them, right? That's the changing circumstances, values, perspectives, and so forth. Yeah. So it's been interesting teaching those stuff, and also North Korea too. Of course, because of the situation there, this very tense situation there, the understanding of North Korea is fairly thin, to say the least, in South Korea. So I try to, tell them the realities of North Korea, what's being misunderstood about North Korea or misconceptualized about North Korea, and so forth. So I try to shed light on the things that they don't know, as opposed to just regurgitating things that they already do know. Yeah.
What for you? What would be one or two major misconceptions that students that you've taught in South Korea have about North Korea?
Okay. Actually, in South Korea, the perspectives towards North Korea is fairly divided in a way that you have a growing number of people who do not want unification at all, right? You also have a large number of students or people in the younger generation who considers North Korea almost like a completely different country, right? Technically, it's not, right? Legally, North Korea is part of South Korea. However, they say, well, no, North Korea is just way too foreign ideologically, politically, and so forth. And they also have this view that North Korea, in North Korea, everyone's poor and everything's isolated, everyone's brainwashed, which is not wrong, but not completely correct. There's a lot of things going on, sort of micro aspects of society there, and there's in fact a transformation going on in North Korea, such as the spread of capitalism, right? The fact that people may be indoctrinated in ideology, but are not so blindly following the ideologies that are being sort of pushed into their brains, right? So there are things I try to teach them, right? You know, things like, there are real estate agents in North Korea, for example, right? You can buy anything from cigarettes to train tickets in the black market in North Korea. Those kind of things I try to teach. They're things I try to teach, as well as one of the things is what circumstances have changed for North Korea, right, in its history. Has it all been the same, like it's said in newspapers or textbooks? Not really. No, right? There's been many changes there. What's the structure of the North Korean system, right? And what are the processes there, right? So try to sort of find the themes and some better ways of conceptualizing North Korea. And well, the best judge for this will be the students themselves. So you can bring them into the studios and they'll give it a earful. But there's sort of things I want to focus on. You know, so understanding the causes of things as opposed to just the symptoms and what we see in the front page.
Is there a difference? Because oftentimes when we talk about South Korea, we tend to get focused on Seoul and the viewpoints in Seoul.
Right.
I mean, going all the way down to Pusan, is there a different outlook, generally speaking, than up in Seoul, or? Definitely.
Well, Korea is, maybe divided is not the right word, but there are strong colors. Right? Just like how you have blue states and red states here in the US, you have that in Korea as well. Pusan, which is the southeast region of Korea, otherwise known as the Yeongnam region, it's predominantly conservative. Right? So in elections, you just see the color red everywhere, right? With number 1, which is the ballot number. So it's predominantly conservative, whereas in the southwestern region, it's more sort of progressive, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's where Kim Dae-jung, the more liberal president, came from, and they've got a stronghold there. Right. So there are different perspectives there. In Pusan, many of the people I've met from the older generations, I'll say late 50s and up, they have a very conservative view towards North Korea. Say no, we are one country. They deserve to be X, Y, Z. Whereas in more liberal sides, they'll say, well, no, we should try dialogue in North Korea. The U.S. ROK alliance is too rigid and so forth. And so you have conflicting views there, right? Which is the reason why there's been sort of a lot of heated debates about how the U.S. ROK alliance should be upgraded in dealing with North Korea. And that's still ongoing right now. What to do with that missile defense system and so forth. And so I think, right now Korea is going through a lot of societal transitions, and that puts up a lot extra dilemmas for the government in South Korea.
How's been the view? I mean, because we've been hearing for several years now that the U.S. is wanting to sort of shift the nature of the military alliance.
Right.
And oftentimes with alliances that the United States has, the U.S. would always like its ally to do more.
Yeah.
Right? That there's concerns about the ally free riding, whether it's NATO or Japan or South Korea. And perhaps a shift away from sort of territorial defense of South Korea to Korea being more of a net security provider for the region. I mean, how's that perceived in South Korea?
I think that is one of the key topics that's being discussed in Korea intensely, right? From what I see, there's generally strong support for the U.S. ROK alliance, right? That's fine. However, in recent years, particularly the last 1 or 2 years, there's been a lot of people who would say the U.S.-Japan alliance has gone through a lot of upgrades, right? But our alliance hasn't. There's been really no change in any way, right? That meets the standards of the changes going on in the U.S.-Japan lines. So there's some frustrations towards that. And however, when you ask them, okay, so how should it be upgraded, then there are question marks popping up everywhere. Right. So I think again, it's the conceptualization aspect, right? Are they asking the right questions, or are they asking similar questions, right? I mean, that doesn't really seem to be there, right? People have their own ideas, but they're not really forwarding that. One of the reasons why it is such a dilemma is because of the China factor, right? South Korea has very strong economic relations with China, and they don't want to undercut that through any sort of robust or anything that looks abrupt, right? In terms of upgrading the alliance. That said, they also do know that something has to be done about the alliance to make sure that North Korea does not do anything abrupt. So this, it's like choosing between the rock and a hard place, right? And that's something that every country goes through, but I think it's particularly accented in South Korea right now. Yeah.
Kind of along those same lines, to talk about a conversation we were having a little bit earlier before the show, one thing that's often written about in sort of U.S. circles is sort of this perhaps a growing sort of maritime role for South Korea and the South Korean Navy. What's this? I have no idea to the answer to this question, so that's why I'm asking it to you. What is your sense of, is there a growing sort of maritime consciousness in South Korea? I mean, because that's one of the key things that for most writers on sea powers, you need to have a country that is really tied and perceives sort of events and policies in the maritime realm in order to be a maritime power. Is that a shift that you see in South Korea?
Yeah, the South Korean Navy has become a lot stronger in the last 10, 20 years. Right? Their power projection has gone up. They've got large ships now, right? Everything from the Dokdo class, to other kinds like, or even easier ships, right? So they've got the capabilities there, right? However, the application of those capabilities is still, I'll say, in its early stages. With the issues going on in South China Sea, South Korea has remained fairly quiet compared to, say, Japan or other countries in the region. And again, so that they don't upset the relations with China. However, they've proved to be fairly capable in the African region. So they do have the assets there. But again, it's the application. And this goes back to a question you asked before about, Korea, what's Korea's role? What is tough for South Korea is that the North Korea factor, right, is always going to be looming in the background. So they don't want to overstretch themselves, right? And also that they've got to realign themselves in a way that, Korea has mainly focused on the army for many years for political reasons and for strategic reasons to deter the North Korean threat. Naval capabilities is something new. Right? It's something that they can definitely take a productive role in, but the technological shift and the political or the strategic shift to those assets, I'll say, is still in its early stages. Right? This is they're in the early part of the learning curve there. Yeah.
Beyond the Navy, does the Korean political class or the Korean population, do they perceive themselves to be sort of a maritime nation? I mean, I know there's the great tradition of the turtle boats, right, and all of this sort of thing, the big statues that you see to the admiral in Seoul. But I mean, is that something? Is there sort of a growing sort of maritime perception or maritime culture in South Korean people or the political class?
Compared to the other countries in the region, no, I don't think it's as strong. But it is getting some greater recognition, right? However, again, even say South China Sea, a lot of people, even my students, it's something that's fairly new to them, right? They know something's going on there, but it's again something that's fairly distant to them as opposed to something that's felt as a close issue in Japan. Right, so you can say that consciousness of maritime issues is still, not as strong compared to other maritime nations in East Asia.
Kind of related to that, with the, we've been paying a lot of attention to the South China Sea and also the sort of Senkaku issue. I mean, what's the viewpoint in South Korea toward that? Because it has its own sort of maritime disputes with Japan over Dokdo and these things. I mean, do the South Koreans that you teach, that you interact with, in a sense, do they side with the Japanese, with the Chinese on the Senkaku issue, or?
No, they don't take sides. However, they are preoccupied by when you talk about territorial issues with Koreans, they normally go to the Dr. Takeshimi issue, right? So they. For the people who are seasoned in international relations or international security, they can make the distinction. But for the general public, understanding also contextualizing in a South China Sea issue or the Senkaku Diaritai issue, it's not really the area. They haven't gone that far.
Yeah.
So that no, they don't take sides there.
Okay, interesting.
Yeah.
If we're looking toward sort of perceptions of sort of North Korea, and you mentioned there's been sort of a shift in generations about how people think about unification, or if it's totally an alien country, where do they generally see the main security threat coming from for North Korea? What are they most worried about?
Okay. It comes from various. One is that a lot of people are worried about the stability of North Korea, right? Because if North Korea collapses, and if things go haywire, well, it's going to affect South Korea directly, right? So they're worried about that stability, both in the political sense but also in the economic sense, right? Because now South Korea views that they're going to have to sort of take on that burden, right, of sort of recovering North Korea or whatever. Militarily, of course, that's something that's haunted South Korea for many, many years, since the division. However, the level of alertness has gone down. First time I went to South Korea about 10, 15 years ago, whenever the sirens went off, right? There was supposed to be like this drill where people had to go underground and so forth. People disappeared from the streets. However, now the sirens will go off like every 15th of every month. People are like just walking around, just drinking coffee and having cigarettes and so forth. Right? So the level of alertness has gone down right, compared to the Cold War years. So they're worried about the military threat, but at the same time, it's definitely not practiced as much in the previous years. Maybe because there's a stronger level of confidence against North Korea. The other one is that before they, during the Cold War, they were worried about North Korea invading South Korea, but nowadays, again, there's this confidence, or maybe there's some other better words to describe this, but people are not as scared about that prospect. It's not in the front of their minds as it was in early years. Right. And of course, this could be because of the changing realities in North Korea, and it could also be because they're worried about other things in the region, such as maybe China or Japan or anything else.
Okay, interesting. Yeah. We'll take a short break, and we'll come right back, continuing our conversations about North Korea and security issues in Northeast Asia. Okay?
Aloha, namaskar, and hello. My name is Anu Hittel, and I host the show called Climate Change Beyond Outrage. We go beyond outrage to find solutions to climate problems facing people, nations, and the world. I hope you will join me here every Tuesday at 1 o'clock. We broadcast live from thinktechhawaii.com. Aloha and bye-bye.
Okay, I'm Jay Fidel, that's Ray Starling. We co-host a show called Hawaii, the State of Clean Energy, every Wednesday, 4 to 5 p.m. It's really interesting. Ray has a way of unzipping these guys. He asks them these questions and all this stuff tumbles out, and we find out stuff we would never know about without Ray's questions. Thank you, Ray.
You're welcome, Jay. I'm very pleased to be your Ed McMahon every Wednesday at 4 o'clock here on the internet. So you can join us and see what's happening in the energy world, and there is a lot going on. So join us every Wednesday at 4 o'clock.
Yeah, come around, be energized, right here on Think Tech. Aloha.
Hello, and welcome back to Global Connections. We're talking about Northeast security issues with Ryo. All right, so we talked about Korean military threats to South Korea. I mean, this has been in the news lately. with both missile tests and the suspected hydrogen bomb tests
Yeah.
that North Korea has done. I mean, what's your perception on this? Is this sort of more of the same? Did they actually conduct an actual hydrogen bomb test, or?
Well, whether they conduct a hydrogen bomb test is, largely unknown, unless you're actually there on the site. Although, I mean, signs are that it wasn't really a hydrogen test like they say, like the North Koreans claim. With the nuclear missile test, it is sort of another episode of North Korea's provocations. What's different is that there's a lot more politicization to this, right? I mean, they're talking about it's a symbol of the party, it's the achievement of the party and Kim Jong-un and all that. So there's a lot of political branding there. Another thing that's interesting is that North Korea's, at least rocket missile capabilities, seem to be going through some improvements, right? Now, of course, the miniaturization technology and the ability to put the projectile back into atmosphere, those things are questionable. But so far, they've had last two tests, one in 2012 and one in 2001 this year, has been able to go into space, right? Whereas in previous years, it sort of failed, right? It didn't even go into space. So we do see some incremental improvements here. Now, putting the WMD issues aside, I also do a lot of work on North Korea's conventional capabilities, which is showing interesting signs, right? In the way that what we see in the last approximately 10 years is this diversification of mobilization capabilities. Right? Before, it's always been, all right, let's throw some let's do a nuclear test. Let's throw some missiles into the sea to upset, South Korea, U.S., Japan, and so forth. But now, from about 2010, they conducted some military provocations, which were deadly, such as sinking of the South Korean naval ship in the western coast or shelling of Yeonpyeong Island. They're trying to find new ways to upset South Korea. Another one is cyber capabilities. Right? So we had, at least 3 or 4 types of actualized, conventional asymmetric provocations that were deadly or at least disruptive, but they've got other things up their sleeve. For example, they've got a 1940s airplane, right, Antonov 2, which is like pretty much an agricultural crop duster from the 1940s, but they've wrapped canvas around it, they've made some upgrades to it, and now it's a stealth airplane. Right? It's a low-flying stealth airplane, but it's not as visible on the radar as other planes, to transport either guerrilla troops or even some small, bombs, right? So we see North Korea trying to be innovative in the use of old platforms. Right? North Korea's conceptualization of technology is different from other countries.
Sure.
For us, it will be, when we say technological innovation, it's about the innovation of technology itself. But for North Koreans, it's more about the innovation in the use of technology, right? And so asymmetric warfare comes into play. Right? So asymmetric applications of these old technologies. And that's something that North Korea, I'll say, is one of the aces up their sleeve, right? It's not just WMDs, but they've got other ways to upset South Korea and the US. And that may, I think that also has an impact on South Korea. Because the South Koreans are not so worried about long-range missiles, but they are worried about, for example, special forces troops coming in, or artillery shelling of, say, Seoul or cities near the border. Yeah, so it's these asymmetric capabilities that we should also be keeping an eye on as well.
I mean, one thing, you mentioned something that's captured a lot of attention and a lot of security analysts in the past 5 or so years is this rise of sort of either asymmetric capabilities, as we've seen with the People's Liberation Army, and this a lot of people talking about how China is looking for capabilities not to match the United States or Japan sort of platform to platform, but sort of drawing upon both technology and then older sort of arguably Chinese strategic traditions like the assassin's mace, and we can quote Sun Tzu and all this kind of stuff. Flip side of the world, if you look at Russia, I mean, a lot of attention is given to this new hybrid warfare model that people are saying that the Russians have used in Ukraine or maybe even Syria. Is there, in a sense, a North Korean way of war, in a sense, that embraces this sort of kind of hybrid warfare capabilities, would you say?
Well, maybe not so hybrid. North Korea is being so stuck to the traditions of asymmetric warfare, even from say Kim Il Sung's days as a guerrilla fighter. Right? There's all sorts of versions about his background, but guerrilla warfare is something that they've always stuck to. Right? North Korea hasn't really gone through modernization that's extensive as say the PLA or even Russia. In the 1960s, when North Korea forged this idea of military lines of the party, right? Military modernization, fortification of the state, cadre-based army, and militarization of the populace, right? The military modernization part, again, is focusing more on some low-intensity guerrilla warfare kind of capabilities. For example, Kim Il Sung once said, "We prefer to have slow, low-flying airplanes as opposed to these jet fighters that the Soviets are building." Right? North Koreans do have some advanced jets, but large because of cost as well. But they know that they can't face South Korea and the U.S. head to head. So again, they got to find some small, other means, and they realize that asymmetric capabilities do not have to rely on advanced technologies. Right? The other thing is that North Korea has an army of 1.3 million people. Right? To make it to make the whole military technologically advanced, well, it's gonna, the costs are just gonna be way too high. Even though North Korea spends a hell of a lot of its budget on the military, right? So they've got to find these cheaper ways. They've got to find, so that it might sound odd, but economic ways that are effective in their capabilities, right? And so cyber is one, artillery, right? Positioning of artillery near the border. Some small submarines, some small hovercrafts that can be used for these mini amphibious maneuvers and so forth. That's something they've always been that they have pursued for many years.
Have you seen indication? I know this is kind of asking you to look into the future, which is always unfair, but there seems to be a growing interest in different parts of the world for sort of these non-conventional sort of operations done either by commando groups or by terrorists, and whether it's the Mumbai attacks back in 2008 or using the little green men and Crimea and things. If I think back to my limited knowledge of North Korean history, North Korea has done these things in the past, like the Blue House raid, and some of the terrorist attacks that were done in the 70s and the 80s, supposedly under Kim Jong-il's leadership. Do you have a concern that North Korea might look at, hey, just like we used commandos 30 years ago to do sort of terrorist actions, other countries are using that right now. It seems to work. Right. Is that a possibility in South Korea? Yeah,
that's the possibility, and that's something that is in front of the minds of many people in South Korea, that's for sure, right? So commando invasions. But also we see, again, these diversifying capabilities, such as there's this UAV, right? It looked like something from Toy Story, right? This like blue little toy-looking plane. It was just thrown over the border, right? It had a Nikon camera inside, right? Anyone can make that thing, but it made it into South Korea. So you can see a lot of vulnerabilities in South Korea towards North Korea's these new asymmetric capabilities. Last year, there was a landmine that exploded, maiming 2 South Korean soldiers. So North Korea is just poking, around all sorts of places, right? Trying to find what works, right? And I think they're still in that stage, right? And they'll continue that because it's sort of the North Korean style, as long as that regime survives, right? Who knows? They might come out with something new that even I don't know. But this diversification of mobilization capabilities is one of the great big themes of the North Korean defense planners.
Okay. Where does the clashes on the northern limit line that we've seen the past 10 or so years, whether it's the sinking of the Chonin or some of these other naval engagements that happen, I mean, is that just part of this large campaign, or is that a specific thing about the maritime dispute, or?
It's a mixture of both. The North and South Koreans haven't come to an agreeable conclusion on the so-called northern limit line, right? So they've got different interpretations, and so it's this gray area, right? And North Korea always takes advantage of these gray areas. Anything that is vague, anything that that shows any signs of vulnerabilities on the opponent's end. So northern limit line is like an area of exploitation, I should say, for North Koreans, which is the reason why the Cheonan was able to be done, and also the Yeonpyeong Island, right? They're both in the area. We don't really see similar kinds of clashes, or certainly not as many, on the eastern coast of the Korean Peninsula. So you can see just how intense or how tense things are on the western coast of Korea. And yeah, so I think that is going to be a hot spot between two Koreas for the years to come.
Okay, we'll take another short break and we'll be right back.
Aloha, this is Reg Baker and I am the host of Business in Hawaii. We talk about positive stories of businesses in Hawaii, how they have been successful and how they have overcome some of the obstacles that a lot of us encounter when we try to have a business here. And believe it or not, there are a number of positive stories here, and we want to talk to all of you. So we broadcast live every Thursday at 2 o'clock, and it rebroadcasts again on Olelo Channel 54. So I sure hope to see you next time. Please tune in on Thursdays at 2 o'clock. Thank you.
Aloha, I'm Kaui Lucas, host of Hawaii is My Mainland, here on Think Tech Hawaii every Friday at 3 p.m. We address issues of importance for those of us who live here on the most isolated landmass on the planet. Please come join me Fridays at 3 p.m. Mahalo.
Hello and welcome back to Global Connections. We're talking about North Korea and Northeast Asian security issues. Before the break, we've been talking about North Korean military capabilities and some of the security threats that they pose to the region. I'd like to maybe take, as best as we can, take a look maybe inside of North Korea. I mean, for a lot of people on the outside, I think Americans, Japanese, maybe even South Koreans as well, I mean, it looks like a very odd place, right, in a sense, and it's very easy to make fun of it in pop culture, with whether it's Team America or The Interview or something like that. I mean, what's for your best guess? I mean, in terms of the nature of the leadership now, and under Kim Jong-un, I mean, is it different than his father, or different than his grandfather, or is it basically it's a dynasty, so it's about the same? I mean, what do we know about him?
Well, it is a dynasty. There's three principles to North Korean politics. One is politicization, so politicizing everything like in the same color. Centralization, so that everything has to be under the leader, and inheritance, so i.e. dynasty. So so Kim Jong-un does follow the basic lines of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. That said, my personal view is that Kim Jong-un is a more hands-on and perhaps even a stronger leader than his father was, Kim Jong-il. Yeah. We see Kim Jong-un being more sort of forward-leaning, or at least more proactive in the public. He's done a lot of live speeches, right? He's not afraid to be, to go out into the public and, to interact with people or so forth, although they're staged. He shows that side of him. Whereas with Kim Jong-il, I've only heard his voice twice, on two different occasions. With Kim Jong-un, many times. So Kim Jong-un is trying to be more hands-on like his grandfather, Kim Il-sung. So there is a different style there. Kim Jong-un is definitely more contemporary in his taste, right? We see some new buildings popping up. And we also see sort of more visual improvements, although I carefully use that word, in Pyongyang and elsewhere. So his tastes are coming forward. However, he's also more ruthless. There's been a lot more executions, more visible ones. There's been many more purges. And what's interesting is that there's been, at least on 4 or 5 occasions, changes in the General Chief of Staff in the North Korean military, and also the Minister of the People's Armed Forces, which is like Ministry of Defense, Department of Defense, right? And it takes about quarter of the transitions that we've seen in the history of North Korea. So we see a lot of interchanges in North Korea in the personnel side, right? It shows that Kim Jong-un is trying to centralize things and to sort of dumb down the hierarchy so that he is the absolute leader and that no one challenges him. Anything that is different from his views or anything that's different from the leadership's views, they're done. Okay. So we see a refinement of the North Korean hierarchy, and that's something that was not as visible under Kim Jong-il, and it's probably something that many should be aware of. when it comes to North Korean politics.
This might sound like a basic question, but in Pyongyang, I mean, what are some of the power factions? Because even, I mean, I think one thing that's often misunderstood when we look at authoritarian governments is we tend to focus, on the head, on the dictator, on the king, whatever it is.
Right.
But in many ways, they're often carefully balancing coalitions and different factions that, while independent or perhaps, not that powerful, but basically keep the state moving. I mean, what are some of the main factions that he's having to juggle and at times purge?
Right. Well, in North Korea, technically there are no factions. Right. Kim Il-sung, Kim Jong-il, and even Kim Jong-un have done their very best to do that. There were factions in North Korea in the past, up until about the 60s. However, Kim Il-sung cleaned them out, and that's the reason why we have this absolute system under Juche or whatever we want to call it. There has been debates, however, on divisions or differences between the Workers' Party of Korea and the military. So the professional officers of the military, like the field generals and so forth. And so people have talked about that. But that said, what Kim Jong-un is doing right now is trying to settle that by saying everything has to be under me, everything has to be through the Workers' Party, and that the military works for the party, right? However, of course, for say the field general who's been in the military for 30 years, as a field commander, being told what to do by the political party, or Kim Jong-un, who is supposed to be the superior but is only 30-something years old, they're going to be uncomfortable with that. They may not challenge him, but they may have some questions, right? And that's something that gets them in trouble. Yeah. So there are no clear black and white factions. However, there seems to be some slow progress, or things. Not everything's on the same page, right? If Kim Jong-un detects that, he'll make sure that they're on the same page, and that involves purges, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's a nasty situation there, right? But again, what you see in Pyongyang, right, is quite different from what you see in other parts of North Korea, right? Elections are orchestrated, right? The people are indoctrinated, but we see a lot of transformations into society in North Korea. Spread of capitalism, black markets, and so forth, behavior of citizens. That are perhaps often ignored or overlooked when we look at North Korea, right? So we see the transformation of the society on one hand, and we see this increased centralization, politicization in politics, right? Whether this leads to some kind of inevitable change, I don't know. What we do know is that as long as this strict state surveillance is there in North Korea, it's going to be hard to mount any organized opposition towards the regime. So we're going to see this, contradictory status for some years to come.
You raised an interesting point that I don't think a lot of people think about. I mean, we tend to be focused on the regime, Pyongyang, the military, but what are, you mentioned sort of the changes in North Korean society. I mean, one of the things that traditionally, when you look for social movements or revolutions is look for some sort of demographic change, right? So if you find that there's a lot of young people who don't have work, don't have opportunity and things, that's normally when things are more likely to change. I mean, we have, other than a lot of stereotypes about starvation and famine, I mean, what are some of the things that we've seen the past 20, 30 years in changes in North Korean society?
Right. Well, the older generations of North Korea, people who are in the 70s or 80s, and a lot of those people are in the high echelons of the North Korean government, they've witnessed North Korea when they were strong, right? When they were economically fairly advanced in the 60s, when things were a lot better and stable, right? With the younger generations in the 30s or 40s, they only know the North Korea, when it was in real bad in circumstances. More so in the 20s and teens, right? So that kind of generational change it creates a lot of difficulties, not only for the regime, but also for the populace, of course. And so the spread of these black markets and capitalism, that is a bottom-up response to the mismanagement of the government. Right? So the view is, if the government's not going to, give us what we want, right, the welfare, the food, the pay, and all that, well, then we'll find our own ways, and that is black markets, right? So people are relying less on the state system, right? That said, right, it's like it's like high school, right? Someone can misbehave in school, whether it's smoking or whatever. But it doesn't mean that they're going to go and punch the headmaster in the face. That's something that a North Korean defector told me, right? And it's something that you see in North Korea. People may do all these like capitalist stuff and black market stuff, but they're not going to challenge the regime because they know that that's just suicidal, right? So again, it doesn't. The societal transformation doesn't necessarily go mean political transformational transition, right? And so again, it's sort of that contradictory state we see, right? So generational changes, yeah, it's there, but whether that is going to amount to any significant change is questionable for now.
I mean, again, to put you on the spot for predicting the future, I mean, what are some trends or some things that we should be watching for when we're thinking about North Korea and its interactions with South Korea and Japan and in the United States? What are some things in the next year or two we should probably be aware of?
I like to focus on domestic issues, and I think what we should watch out for is how much longer Kim Jong-un will continue to politicize and centralize leadership, right? And how well he manages the personalities working for him, his aides, in other words, without causing political disruption or instability. That's sort of the key, right? Because what happens in North Korea, well, that's going to formulate the policies against South Korea, U.S., Japan, right? So I think it's the domestic politics. There's going to be some important events coming up, right? The Workers' Party are holding some major gatherings this year. And also, now that it's been several years since Kim Jong-un's come into power, he may start to brand North Korea in his own ways, right? He's going to be more aggressive in that. So, the color that he paints North Korea, right? That's going to be a strong determinant to North Korea's strategic behavior, and that's something that we should. That's sort of the point that I want to watch for in terms of understanding North Korea's behavior in the future.
Okay. I mean, kind of go back maybe to what we started with in the conversation,
Right.
and your kind of unique perspective of, both being from Japan, but then being working and studying in South Korea. I mean, both countries and the United States, I would add, are very concerned about North Korea's potential security threat. What would you say are the differences in how it's perceived as a threat between, say, Japan and South Korea?
Well, for Japan, it's sort of a threat or concern that's in the region, right? However, for South Korea, particularly under South Korean law, constitution in South Korean constitution, North Korea is not a state, right? It's part of the Republic of Korea. So it's not a foreign issue to them; it's a domestic issue, right? Trade with North Korea is not foreign trade; it's internal or special trade. So South Koreans have a lot to worry about because it's something that's happening in their doorstep, not just close to it. So I think that's the key difference. This is sovereignty issues come in and domestic issues come in. Domestic law is applied to North Korea, but whether the unification process is going to be smooth and goes well and goes planned, that's something they're the questions that the South Koreans have to answer that the Japanese don't, right? And also for the U.S. For the U.S., of course, is the WMD threat. So South Koreans in South Korea, the list is bigger, right? Concerns.
Yeah.
And that's the key difference.
Okay, interesting. Well, thank you very much.
Thank
That's all
you,
the time we
Mahalo.
have on ThinkTech. We were joined by Dr. Hinata-Yamaguchi, who's a visiting professor at Pusan National University, studying on North Korean security issues. I'm Patrick Bratton for Global Connections, and thank you to Jay and Zuri and Nick and all the team here on ThinkTech. So look forward to talking with you next time.